Hey guys, I just wanted to give you a quick warning before you watch this video. Basically, it's all unscripted, and throughout most of it, I'm sick. I filmed most of this on one day where I was feeling awful, and that does kind of come across in my way of talking about music. A lot of the times I'm very dismissive. You may find it hilarious, but there are definitely moments where I think, yeah, maybe I was being a bit too much of a dick. But again, I was sick, so please keep that in mind when you're watching it. With that said, you will also see moments where you're getting this kind of lighting and the camera quality is different. Basically, I sound better because I'm about to film the rest of my reactions for the Record Roundup finale right now. Hope you enjoy. Hi guys, welcome back to the Social Tune and the Record Roundup finale for 2017. So as you can clearly tell, I'm sick, but I know I have to film something and it's not going to be my next Record Roundup or any of the year-end lists, so it may as well be something that I don't really have much stake in. And I'm going to keep it simple. In this video, I'm going to say a few words about these albums that I listened to in 2017, but don't really have much to say about. Also, all of this is going to be unscripted, because I really couldn't go to the bother of writing something for every single album here. You'll have to excuse all the dogs barking outside. They will not shut up for some reason. I'm really sorry about that. So let's not waste any more time. Let's dive in. AFI came back with a vengeance this year, and while many people didn't really like this album, I thought it was okay. I think it's because I listened to that CyHi Vessel album earlier that year, which going back to it really was so middle of the road in terms of punk music. And if I'm being honest, punk rock wise, this really isn't that bad, and as AFI albums go, I've definitely heard worse. So solid 6 out of 10. Check it out if you're a fan of theirs, or if you're just curious.
I take your hand and ask you, have you made plans for the rest of your life?
This is by far one of the most boring country albums I've heard all year. I mean, there are some good moments, you kinda have to when one of your songwriters is Laurie McKenna, but then you see that some of your other songwriters include Ed Sheeran and, worst of all, Meghan Trainor. So in the end, even though good writing props it up, bad music pushes it back down, and everything else is just middle of the road and bland. Hell, even our two performers, who are meant to be husband and wife, barely have any chemistry. So it's a 5 out of 10, in one ear and out the other, on to the next one. I had a lot of people asking me to check out this album by Aimee Dorval, and believe it or not, I had actually come across her before. If you remember, a couple of years ago, Spectrum Pulse reviewed this album called Casualties of Cool, and if you check it out, it's a fantastic side project orchestrated by the one and only Devin Townsend, and that's how I found out about it. And she performed on that album and was incredible. She really was incredible. And that does carry over to this album. Her voice is incredible here. My only real complaint is that a lot of it does kind of feel one note, and it is kind of frustrating because her voice sounds amazing and some of these lyrics are absolutely incredible, but at the same time, even though some of it is profoundly depressing and some of it really does get to you, after a while it does kind of start to run together, and that is very frustrating to me. So overall, I'm going to give this an extremely strong 7 out of 10 and definitely recommend that you check it out.
'Cause they are true. Why would you say those words to me if you could not follow through?
So Jesca Hoop, I know that she signed on to Sub Pop Records, and that's really everything I know about her apart from this album. And I enjoyed this, I really did. I thought on the first couple of listens that it was a tad boring maybe, but the more I listened to it, the more the composition stuck out to me. While the entire album is organic, there are definitely certain songs that will jump out at you more than others, and I personally really appreciated the bass lines here, the ones where it really did sink in. Yeah, there are some slightly more boring songs here and there, and the lyrics are nothing amazing in in any way. But at the same time, you could do far worse than this album, and as singer, songwriter, folk kind of singers go, I think Jesca Hoop is definitely a good choice. So, light 7 out of 10. I think that's fair enough.
I'm so in love with the man of the future. The only one that brings me joy is my computer boy.
Oh my god, I did not know anything about Poppy before I got all those requests to check out this album. And after listening to said album, and after going back to those videos of Poppy, she's definitely interesting. She's got an attitude that kind of reminds me of Alessia Cara on Here. It's smart, but it knows how to conform, while also still, you know, remaining smart and being aware of the hypocrisies going on and stuff like that. And that's what a lot of her music is about. It's about deconstructing pop stereotypes and subverting them and making fun of them while still staying pop through and through. It's kind of like Mariana Trench's song Pop 101 in the same satire vein, even though I wouldn't say there's a song of hers that really sticks out to me as much as Pop 101. But at the same time, Poppy.Computer, her debut, is something that is a bit more accessible. It's definitely weird. The opening track, I'm Poppy, is... wow, it's just so weird. But the final track, Pop Music, by contrast, is the most acoustic ballad on this entire thing, and it is such a good deconstruction of pop music as a whole. It almost has a shot in my top 50 songs of the year purely based on its concept, as it basically takes the idea of pop music and how it makes you feel even if you know it's dumb and derivative. And on top of that, a lot of these hooks are really strong, a lot of the production is really good. There are some cheaper moments here and there. There is repetition that's used and abused quite a lot on this album. But again, it's trying to be a prototypical pop album while still being weird in its own thing. And based on those merits, I think that this is a really good debut and a very good access point to Poppy's music. So in the end, I'm going to give this a solid 7 out of 10.
I got no rules, I count 'em.
Okay, I was very late on Dua Lipa. Hell, I was even really late on hearing New Moves. And for the first time in this video, I can definitely say this is a great debut. Dua Lipa has so much energy to her, she has so much charisma, and her voice is gorgeous, and she really has a talent and an ear for hooks. And there are quite a few good songs here. In fact, I wouldn't even say there's a song here I dislike. My only problem with it is that it is a little unrefined. It's definitely her still finding her footing a bit. But again, as a pop debut, it's definitely great. It's a really solid first effort. So I'm thinking a light 8 out of 10. I don't quite think she's on the level of, say, Lorde yet, like some people have said, but in terms of pop music that is on the radio at the moment, I definitely think that Dua Lipa is ahead of the curve and above average.
Let me hit my folks, but you know the only rule, no dope on Sundays. That's only if you really out here getting money.
You know, I went into this with such high expectations. Everyone was going on about the production and the beats and the lyrics, and I'm kind of on the fence on it. Here's the thing, I don't find these beats all that compelling. There are definitely some that stick out to me, but a lot of it just blurs together. Honestly, the most consistent element on this album is CyHi himself. He's a very compelling performer, and on top of that, he has such a great talent for wordplay. The way he phrases things is so interesting. But with that said, the content leaves a lot to be desired. Not on every song here. The title track, No Dope on Sundays with Pusha T, is by far the best song here, where they both deliver great verses, especially Pusha. But on a lot of the content here, it's very prototypical gangster rap, and a lot of it falls into cliche. And I wouldn't mind so much if it weren't for the fact that on certain songs he's judging gangster rappers while he's still acting like one, and that's what gets to me. It's the hypocrisy on display here. But ultimately, the beats have some standout moments. Like I said, Pusha T's good, even if I wasn't wild on all of the guests. And CyHi himself is, at least lyrically, for the most part, very impressive. So I'm going to give this debut, I suppose, a very strong 6 out of 10. I know that that's going to be lower than a lot of you want, but hey, it's just my opinion.
For the same things, we all live or die for the same things. See, I be doing my best just to maintain. See, I be doing my best just to make way.
Okay, if you want a real MC, one that way too many have slept on this year, look no further than Ill Camille. This full-length debut, I believe it's a debut of hers, is so impressive. It's basically an amalgamation of all the ideas that she's had over the past couple of years, working with people like Kendrick Lamar, and man, does she impress. She's such a good lyricist. She has so much good wordplay. The songs sound amazing. The production is fantastic on so many of these songs. And I really do think that this album will stand the test of time like she wants it to. My only real complaint, and this is a minor thing, but it does get to me, and people did warn me about this going in, was Ill Camille's voice. I'm not the biggest fan of it, and I know that's a weird thing to focus on, but it does distract me a little when listening to these songs. With that said though, still a great album, will definitely stand the test of time, definitely one you should check out if you're in the mood for some great hip-hop. I'm giving this a solid 8 out of 10. It is well deserved, it's a great album, definitely the best album I've looked at on this list so far. Nothing more. This was a musical act that I was asked to look into by fellow music critic Kumarai Fang. You know, it's pretty good. It's okay. I wish I could say more about this, but none of it really stuck with me. And the reason why is that this is a weird mix, because some of it is really hardcore, growled vocals, kind of punk rock music, whereas the other is all clean vocals, and none of the lyrics on either side are all that interesting. I guess it's okay, it's fairly catchy, none of it offended me, but I'm not going to remember this. The most interesting thing about it, like I said, was that it's kind of half and half in its styles. 5 out of 10, and look, Kumarai, if you love this, good for you, just not for me, sorry. The Birthday Massacre. Easily the biggest surprise on this list for me. And if you're wondering why I keep saying list, it's because I had a list of albums for the Record Roundup finale that I had to check out. But wow. This album starts out with One, and it is gorgeous. It's so gorgeous. What I didn't know about this album going in was that this is a goth rock / synth pop act. And they blend those two genres together scarily well. This album sounds amazing. And I am definitely going to be keeping my eye on the Birthday Massacre after this, because I want to hear more of their stuff. With that said, I did check out their previous album, and I do think it's better than this. And the reason that I ultimately feel that this album, Under Your Spell, falls a little short in terms of their discography is because it sounds amazing. If you are a newcomer to their sound, definitely check this out because it sounds phenomenal. But it does lack a bit of a lyrical punch. The album can blend together a bit, and while some songs do stick out, some really do go in one ear and out the other. And ultimately, my favorite part about this album, and the part I'm going to remember, is the sound, and everything else, I can take it or leave it. Even though I will admit that the front woman of this band, I can't remember her name right now, is amazing. She really is, and she deserves a lot of props. So ultimately, I'm still heartily recommending this. I'm giving it a solid 8 out of 10, and you should definitely check this album out because you do not want to pass up on this sound. It's probably the best blend of genres I've heard since Algiers. No joke. I really haven't listened to much metal music this year, and that is admittedly my fault. But I definitely did want to check out more in this video, hence we have Edenbridge. And as symphonic metal albums go, this is honestly pretty good. Okay, it's not Epica or Nightwish or Blind Guardian, but it's definitely respectable. And I will definitely say that it has a lot more pomp and swell to it than their last album, which is not a bad thing. So yeah, light 7 out of 10. Check it out if you're curious. I got so many requests to check out this Marilyn Manson album, and it left no impression on me. I mean, look, I get it, there is a horrorcore appeal to this, but Marilyn Manson just doesn't convey that on this album. His older stuff is just better. And yeah, even though I know a lot of people like this, for me, it just didn't do anything. So, 5 out of 10. Take it or leave it. I will say that I do appreciate that this album is at least trying to do more, what with the cancer undertones in the lyrics. But when I heard this months ago, all I could think was, it's pretty good, but nothing all that impressive, and revisiting it months later has not really changed that. I won't say it's boring or bland, but it's only barely good, so light 6 out of 10. I went into this expecting something huge and wonderful, like, you know, Autumn Eternal by Panopticon. I mean, I will say that I was just basing that on the look of the album art, but still. And ultimately, it's pretty good. It's got its beautiful orchestral moments, but I'm not gonna remember this, I'll be honest. It's definitely pretty and beautiful music, but you could do far better in terms of atmospheric music. Heck, I'd even say that that new Bjork album, which incorporates nature sounds, has more depth to it than this. So, yeah, solid 6 out of 10. You know, within the country music scene, this band was so controversial to talk about all year. Everyone who praised them was eventually shouted down by the hundreds of people who were pointing out just what a sellout they were and how transparent this marketing gimmick was. To explain it to those of you who don't know, Midland has actually been making music for a good while now, and it's only really with this album that they were rebranded by their record label as an old, rootsy, folksy kind of act to appeal to an older audience. Basically, it's trying to make the band more authentic than it actually is. And I will admit, there is a side of me that really hates that as someone who loves a lot of indie country that's really damn organic and authentic. With that said though, On the Rocks is a fine album, it really is, and there are enough good hooks and good writing for me to forgive it as a whole. So ultimately, an extremely light 7 out of 10. What can I say? It is catchy, it is easy for me to like this type of music, even if it is painfully transparent.
Who cares if one more light goes out? Well, I do.
I flat out did not want to review this, but there were just so many requests for it. And of course, you should all know why I didn't want to review it. It's because Chester Bennington committed suicide earlier this year, and I was even asked about it on Twitter, how I felt about the lead singer of Linkin Park committing suicide, how that personally affected me. Here's the thing. I was never a fan of Linkin Park growing up. I've never been a fan of theirs. I think some of their songs are fine, but I can also point to a lot of it that's interchangeable for me. So, while I do have a lot of sympathy for the band and for, you know, Chester Bennington's loved ones, and I do admit that, you know, knowing that he would go on to commit suicide really puts this album into perspective, it doesn't change the fact for me that this album is just plain boring. And yeah, I know, that's gonna be controversial. A lot of you probably won't like me saying that, especially considering this album probably makes you feel a certain way now when you go back and listen to it. But I went back to listen to it, and my thoughts on it haven't changed. It's bland, it's ridiculously pop-heavy. That duet with Kiara, annoys me so much, especially considering how much I absolutely hated Gold and everything it stood for. So, yeah, like 5 out of 10. Look, I've praised Kelsea Ballerini in the past, but if I'm going to compare her to other pop country acts like, you know, Jennifer Nettles or even Casey Musgraves to a certain extent, she is far inferior. But I will say, in terms of women in country in the mainstream eye, she's probably the best pick we have right now. And by best, I honestly just mean successful or popular. And with that said, pretty much everything on this album has flopped, with the exception of Legends. So we'll see how it goes, but for me, it was a good album. It's fairly well written. It's better than her last album. But ultimately, that all amounts to a solid 6 out of 10. It's not that impressive. Okay, planning for the burial. Everyone was hyping this album up to me. Everyone was telling me that this new album was going to be one of the best albums of the year, especially one of the best metal albums of the year. It wasn't. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's okay. It's good. It's just so middle of the road. And the recording process makes it feel so cheap, as if it's barely there. It doesn't give the mix any depth, and it just didn't leave much of an impression on me. What can I say? So yeah, Pitchfork may love this, but for me, it's another solid 6 out of 10. Check this out if you're kind of curious, but otherwise, you're not missing much. What can I say? Just revisit everything I said about Linkin Park. I wasn't a huge fan growing up. I think they're easily one of the most overrated acts in rock music, which I know is going to get me a lot of hate, but fuck it. And this album was bland and boring. 5 out of 10. This was not quite as bad as I thought it would be. It's better than his debut, but Brantley Gilbert's attitude when it comes to making music, and essentially still making bro country, even if his instrumentation has got slightly better, is so infuriating to me as a fan of country music. I mean, compared to some of the worst bro country we got in 2013, it's not as bad, but the attitude still drives me up the wall, so strong 4 out of 10. And again, I think that's being generous.
Don't care about what you did, only care about what we do. Dirty laundry looks good on you.
All-time low have reached an all-time low. That joke's been made already, but I don't care. This album was so bland and so boring and so nothing. It doesn't try anything new. 5 out of 10, moving on.
I'm a rebel just for kickstart. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still.
You know, I will admit, Feel It Still has grown on me, but I still stand by that you could switch it in for any number of indie rock songs and you'd be just as well off. And with that said, Feel It Still is probably the best song on this album. It's just not very impressive. I mean, it's okay. I can't really say I've been a big fan of Portugal the Man for years now, but I can still say that in terms of their albums, this is not their best one. But still, there are some catchy hooks here and there, and the instrumentation overall is decent, so I'm going to give it an extremely light 6 out of 10. I feel that's appropriate.
It's all gonna be magnificent, she says.
It's a good album, it has some good hooks, it has some really good songs thrown in there. Nothing really jumped out at me that much though, and considering how some critics have been praising this to high heaven, I don't know, it just didn't leave much of an impression on me. But overall, I do think it's a really good album. The band isn't amazing, but they do a good job. And I will say, I really did enjoy listening to it, even if I don't remember that much of it, even with repeated listens. So, solid 7 out of 10. I think that's fair enough.
Walk you through the dark side of the morning.
I did not expect to be reviewing this for a number of reasons. For one, I will say that I've never been the biggest fan of It Ain't Me with Selena Gomez, which does appear on this album and is going to be one of the biggest hits of 2017. But with that said, Kygo is my favorite part of that song. He has a unique style of production that uses the Vocaloid effect in a very good way. And he really gives his mixes a lot of space that I really did like. In fact, I would say that Kids in Love is easily one of the best summer fun albums that I've heard all year. And there are some good songs here. I would say that the song's individual quality kind of varies along with the performer who's featured on it. So the songs with John Newman, Ellie Goulding are really good, and the title track in particular is a fantastic song with so much swell to it that I would almost say is a contender for my top 50 songs of the year if it weren't for the fact that it kind of heavily rips off, you know, Baba O'Reilly by The Who, which, just like in the case of One Direction, it's still a good song, it's just going to kind of dim it in my eyes. I can't help that. But overall, really good album. I'm gonna give it a solid 7 out of 10. You know, after making my best hit songs of 2004, I actually commissioned myself to review this album, and it was pretty good. Boomiverse is definitely a fun, upbeat album. Some really good features from all across the board, including several from Killer Mike that were awesome, and even Adam Levine shows up on one of the songs here, and is honestly great. It's easily the best thing that he's done all year. So yeah, it's not Big Boy's best album, but I am going to give it a very strong 7 out of 10. And while we're on the topic of Adam Levine, oh my god, Red Pill Blues. I barely know what to say about this album. Adam Levine sounds like he wants to make this about as much as I want to listen to it. Every single instrumental is ridiculously cheap. They're hopping on as many different trends as they can. But with that said, it is better than V. I mean, I know that's not saying much, but at the same time, it is true. This album would be a lot worse to me if I hadn't heard V, and the fact that they do use at least some organic instrumentation does mean something, and there are some good disco grooves here and there. And I will say, it does help that they took out the worst song on the album, Don't Wanna Know, and put it on the bonus edition. So ultimately, it's not their worst album, and it's not as bad as I expected, so really it's kind of like that Chainsmokers album earlier this year. It's bad, but it could have been worse, because I've heard worse. So yeah, not the worst in this band's case, but still a very deserving, strong 4 out of 10.
Bad and bullshit, bad. Cooking up dope with a Uzi. My niggas are savage, ruthless. We got 30s and 100 rounds too. My bitch is bad and bullshit, bad. Cooking up dope with a Uzi.
I was dreading listening to this because I've been listening to Migos for years in the underground scene and they have never impressed me. In fact, I can think of several of their singles that I think are some of the worst music of the decade. But with that said, listening to Culture, they did get better. Bad and Bougie, it's a grower, what can I say, even if Lil Uzi Vert's verse sucks hard. T-Shirt is okay. Even Slippery with Gucci Mane, it could be a lot worse, that's all I'm saying. And considering how huge Migos were all year, I guess I should just be grateful that they did get better. With that said, it's still trap rap, I'm not a big fan of it, it's not that interesting, and it does get very monotonous with the triplet flow. A lot of this album is so easy to tune out. So ultimately, since I'm not going to be reviewing Culture 2, I'm giving this album a strong 5 out of 10. And you know what? I feel they earned it.
Going, it is so
So many of you may be thinking, who the hell is this person? The only reason I know who this person is because I went to see Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit perform live earlier this year in Dublin, and she opened for them, and she was lovely. She was just so compelling. She was such a sweet woman, so I thought, yeah, I'm gonna check out her album, because why not? And it's pretty good. This album is pretty good. I don't think the writing is as good as on some of her previous albums, but it's still solid. The melodies are okay. The hooks in particular actually are very good on some of these songs. And the saving grace of all of it, the thing that really elevates it and puts it, I guess, above just being good, is her voice. Because I already knew when hearing her live that she would sound amazing. But my god, she really does sound incredible on this album. So yeah, if you're looking for an indie country act to really sink your teeth into and to really keep an eye on, I would definitely point to Tift Merritt here. And I'm going to give her album a light 7 out of 10. I think that's fair. Ooh, Ty Segall. You know, I hear this guy's coming out with a new album next year, and I'm definitely curious because everything I've heard from him has somewhat impressed me. And even this album, which is not his best, it's still good. It tries to do this thing where it goes for garage rock, but it doesn't make it unique enough in the lyrics that it really stands out to you. The album is very easy to forget. That doesn't make it bad, but it does make it forgettable. And as such, it's a strong 5 out of 10 because it's still solid, and I know this guy can do better. So, you know, fingers crossed that the next album will be.
Doesn't matter 'cause it's enough to be young and in love.
On the flip side, I've never liked Lana Del Rey. I've said this on many occasions. I think she is such a hack. I think she's so petty. I think that she makes melodramatic music that is so easy to hate. But with that said, this album is by far one of her best. I think Born to Die is slightly better than this, but it's definitely better than her last two albums, which have just been awful, awful, awful albums, both of which would have made my list of the worst albums of their respective years, and the last one actually did. But yeah, this album, it's a step in the right direction. There are some good songs here and there. Her work with The Weeknd is definitely helping her. And yeah, I'm thinking a strong 5 out of 10. And if you're a fan of Lana Del Rey, you will probably hate me because you guys are mostly really malevolent, but I hope you can at least appreciate that I'm giving her the props that she's due.
Heavens above, I'm only human after all. I'm only human after all. Don't put the blame on me.
Another one of the biggest acts in music this year, especially in the UK, especially with his huge lead-off single, Human, but oh, it just did not impress me. The best thing about this album, and the saving grace of it, is Rag and Bone Man's voice. He is such an incredible and powerful vocalist, but the lyrics are so pathetic. They're so pathetic. They're constantly deflecting blame. I feel like I'm listening to that new Taylor Swift album, Reputation, except without the redeeming factors like the production or the moments of inspired writing or the moments where you felt sorry for her. So ultimately, it's an extremely light 5 out of 10, and again, only because Rag and Bone Man's voice does make it listenable. You know, I teased that I was going to make a special video about this album, but ultimately, I just couldn't find enough information on it. The video I was going to do was why people hate Evanescence, because it really does confuse me. As someone who has never been a fan of Evanescence, or really against Evanescence, I never really understood all the hate. And going back to listen to Fallen, I think it's actually a pretty good debut. With that said, the more I looked into it, the more I listened to their music, the more people I talked to, the more I kind of started to see some patterns. One, I will say that their lead singer, she's definitely good, she's not the best, and compared to some other singers in symphonic and power metal, she's not great. Another thing that I definitely think they can be called out on is the fact that they do lean towards mainstream trends, but I will also say that that's probably because of pressure from their record label. But here's the biggest problem, in my opinion. It's not that their lead vocalist is merely really good, it's not that they lean towards trends, it's the fact that their songwriting is borderline childish. It's so simple. None of it has the swell of a Blind Guardian album. And look, yeah, I'm not saying every metal album, especially symphonic metal, has to aspire to be Blind Guardian. I mean, they're the best of the best. But still, you could try to be, I don't know, Avantasia. And for the record, I love Avantasia. Don't leap down my throat about that. And Synthesis is basically a re-recording, a more orchestral recording of a lot of their older songs. And I will say, for the most part, it's really good. A lot of it is very beautiful, very organic. I don't like the two new songs, but you could do worse. This album is not their worst. It's frequently a beautiful project to listen to. And yeah, I do ultimately think this is a really good album, even if it does have its weak points. So, like 7 out of 10. That's my final offer.
Send me your location, let's ride the vibrations. I don't need nothing else but you.
This is one of the biggest new performers of the year, the hottest new performers of the year. And I don't really get the appeal, I'll be honest. Look, Khalid, he has an innocence to him and a likability to him that I definitely do think comes through in his music. He also has a pretty good voice, but I do feel he's overhyped. I mean, part of it has to do with the fact that he was on that 1-800 song, and as anyone will tell you, he's easily the best part of that song. But that's not saying much, let's be honest here. And then there was that song Location, which a lot of people liked. I didn't think Location was any good. I thought it was worthless. I don't quite think it's worst hits of the year material, but it's still nothing to get all riled up about. And then you had Young, Dumb and Broke, which was even worse. I mean, it's just trash. But with that said, listening through this album, there are some good songs. He's a decent songwriter. I don't think that in terms of R&B he's the best around. I still think that we could give Abel's career another try and, you know, see where he goes with that. Because, yeah, he's nowhere near on the same level as some other performers like The Weeknd or Bruno Mars. But this is his major label debut, so that's what we'll judge it as. And based on those merits, I would say it's a good debut. So, solid 6 out of 10. I think that's fair enough.
It's a revolution. Come on, people, you're letting me down.
So you want to know another band I've never been a fan of? Depeche Mode. Synthpop-wise, I get their significance. I get the fact that many people will call them the gods of synthpop. But as I've said before, there's synthpop I like and there's synthpop I don't like. And unfortunately, Depeche Mode specializes in the kind that I don't like. And I will say, Depeche Mode are still good in that vein, but on this album, they try to go more political, and it doesn't work out very well. In fact, I really do think that this is probably their worst album. And look, I've never been a fan of Depeche Mode anyway. I think they have some bad songs. I do also think they have some good songs. But yeah, if I'm going to go to synthpop, I'm going to go for the fun, upbeat stuff like, you know, The Wombats. They released a new single recently. Go listen to that. It's amazing. But as for Depeche Mode, I don't know. Light 5 out of 10. That's all I'm giving it.
Wildin' like the Western down in this concrete jungle, homie. Hope you got your vest on. And your weapon is oil and don't jam, but if it do, leave you through when it's time for that warfare.
Ah, Raekwon. He used to be a member of the famed Wu-Tang Clan. And yeah, this is about what I expected. It's not gonna blow your mind like that last Tribe Called Quest album, but it's definitely really good. It's honestly kind of like listening to Boomerverse by Big Boy. It's not his best, but it's definitely still cool. It has some really good beats. It's just not really groundbreaking in any way, or really anything all that great. But again, really good beats, really good flows, really good subject matter. So yeah, I think he's earned himself a strong 7 out of 10. Raekwon, you just keep doing you, because at this point, I think you've earned to do whatever the hell you want.
The devil introduced me to cooking cocaine, nigga. On the blaze, 7 days, ain't babe a shame, nigga. I was thugging with my trait, motherfucker president, I got a presidential date.
So Freddie Gibbs has had a really tough couple of years, and when he came back, he made this album. And am I the only one who feels that this was really made just to tide fans over? Because yeah, if we're being honest, it's nowhere near as good as his last album. His last album, by which I mean of course his collaboration with Madlib, was incredible. It was one of the best albums of 2014, bar none. This album is so samey all the way through and so basic. There's just nothing all that memorable about this. In fact, if it weren't for Freddie Gibbs himself, this album would be entirely interchangeable. But yeah, considering how hastily this was put out, the quality doesn't really surprise me. So yeah, strong 6 out of 10. I'm waiting on that next real comeback, Freddie. Don't disappoint me.
Focus when I don't, I'm hopeless. When I do, I'm dope as poop. I'm finished surface sofas, hocus pocus. Yo, speaking honestly, it's all an odyssey of curiosities and oddities.
Homeboy Sandman. It is kind of a shame that the main reason I know this guy is because of his work with A$AP Rock. And the reason that's a bad thing is because A$AP Rock is one of my favorite MCs of all time. So, yeah, he's kind of hard to top, and trying to put the two apart is a little hard for me. With that said, I really do like Homeboy Sandman. He's got a great voice, he's got a great off-kilter flow, and this album definitely does showcase that. I will say, it didn't really blow my mind, but it's definitely interesting. It holds your attention, and the way he raps is definitely really cool. It's weird how he's somehow on and off beat at the same time, and with these beats, you kind of can't help but be just that, and most people would not be able to pull it off, so I definitely give him props for that. And so ultimately, a light 7 out of 10 does seem to be in order here.
One more chance before the light goes for summer of love.
So I've been a fan of U2 for years. My parents raised me on them. I can sing along to all their big hits at full volume. This new album is so nothing. And I know that's gonna piss off some people, but it just panders to mainstream trends so hard that it annoyed me. And at the same time, the writing is still good, the melodies are still good, but where are the roaring guitars? Where are the uplifting choruses? And yes, I know, bands are allowed to change with the times, but U2 had such a solid formula, why would you change it? Honestly, I have no idea, and while I will give this album some props, I'm not going to give it much. Strong 5 out of 10, that's all you're getting.
Friday night spotlight, and that was us. It might not have been you, but I can't judge, just be proud of what makes your country.
It's another Luke Bryan album. It's another boring, badly produced, badly written Luke Bryan album. And what can I say about this album that I haven't said about his other albums? Nothing. Other than maybe it's slightly more competent. I mean, he's not entirely unlikable like he is on a lot of his other albums, and as usual, Luke Bryan is a good performer, even though I will say the cracks are starting to show even there. But ultimately, I can't get too angry at this because if the charts are any indication, Luke Bryan's spark is very clearly dying, and he's not going to be around much longer. So it's a strong 4 out of 10. Good riddance, Luke Bryan. I do not want to hear you ever again.
Girl, can't touch my good as gold. I know it's difficult to see me on a roll, but hey, you broke up with me.
Oh goody, just in time for Luke Bryan's departure, we have the new Luke Bryan. A guy who got famous off of a song that makes my skin crawl and has a lack of self-awareness that is truly baffling. I mean, look, he's a good performer, his songwriting ranges from meh to awful, and his instrumentation is processed and middle of the road. So, Really, it's just like that last Luke Bryan album, and in the spirit of that, strong 4 out of 10. I'm not trying any harder for this one.
I'm sweat from head to toe. I'm wet through all my clothes. I'm fully charged, nipples are hot, ready to go.
Really, Tove Lo? After Ladywood, you released this? Did you not hear the millions of people telling you that Ladywood was a bad idea and that you should cancel part 2? Because yeah, doubling down, not a very good idea when the beginning product was so terrible. For those of you who didn't hear it, Ladywood was a train wreck. Not quite as bad as some people said, but still pretty bad. And considering some people a couple of years ago were comparing Tove Lo to Lorde, that's just really, really weird to me. It doesn't take away from the fact that Habits is still a good song, but at the same time, this is just nothing. It leaves no impression on me at all, other than the moments that just make my skin crawl. So like 5 out of 10. Do better.
One foot in front of the other. One foot in front of the other.
You know, it was almost inevitable for Walk the Moon to go electronic, and I was kind of curious to see the result, and the result is okay. I mean, I'll be honest, I wasn't the biggest fan of Talking Is Hard. I thought it was a very inconsistent album, where half the album was upbeat and fun, and the other half was downbeat and not so fun, and you can really tell which one I preferred. And look, I know that was the point of that album, but it still didn't take away from the fact that it was kind of a confused mess. And on this album, it's less of a confused mess, but it's also got less of the high points that that album did. You're not going to find a Shut Up and Dance here. Still, in terms of pop groups that end up going electronic, you could definitely do worse than this, so I'm thinking a solid 6 out of 10. Definitely check it out, and as for Walk the Moon, I would say go back to your 80s rock influences, but honestly, I'm kind of curious to see where you'll go with this. Don't disappoint me.
She know how to party. When I'm with my clique, we know how to party. How to party up, we know how to party.
And finally, Chris Brown. 45 tracks of Chris Brown. Why would you do this to yourself? I don't know why I did it to myself. I listened through this entire thing 3 times. Oh God. And it's not as bad as you think it might be. I mean, there are some good songs. The instrumentation is mostly kind of decent, and it doesn't quite have the absolute awful lows of some of Chris Brown's last albums, but it's still 45 minutes of Chris Brown. There are still so many questionable lyrics. Oh my God, I feel like I have PTSD. This album was bad, and I'm never going to listen to it again. And I don't recommend that any of you put yourself through it. 4 out of 10. That's what it's getting. So yeah, that was my record roundup finale. And yeah, I know I'm sorry if I've seemed very dismissive in this video. I've not been feeling well for a week now, and I'm pretty fed up about it. Honestly, my voice sounds much better than it used to a week ago. So, yeah, things are looking up. That was a chore to get through. But thankfully, that's all the albums for this year. So if there are any more I missed, post them in the comments and I'll let you know in the comments what I thought about them. Please subscribe so you don't miss a thing, and until the next time, I'm Finn, and this is the Social Tunes signing off.